Okay, so AIM 5.11, we're going to talk about the Holocaust, and we're also going to talk about kind of the Nuremberg trials, which is how the really kind of um, finishes off the war in Europe, and that's kind of part of the fallout there. So we'll talk about that stuff. And we just talked about some responses to the do now question, so we're going to get into it. All right, here we go. All right, I'll give you a second here. So, one of the hallmarks of Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler in particular was really this idea of anti-Semitism, which is a kind of extreme form of discrimination against Jews as a religious, ethnic, or racial group. So, Hitler ultimately decides that the Jewish population in Europe is a problem to be solved. And the solution to that problem is something that he will call the final solution. And this is a way to kind of eliminate the Jews from existence entirely. Okay, so this amounts to genocide, the deliberate and systematic killing of a particular racial, ethnic, or religious group, or it could be any other kind of group also. And their elimination is based on their membership of that particular group. And that's really what the Holocaust is. It is genocide. Later on in the year, we go through an entire unit on genocides, so we will talk more about this moving forward. But why did Hitler feel this way? There's a lot of kind of contributing factors that push him towards this. For starters, first of all, let's start with this. Anti-Semitism is not something that was invented by Hitler or the Nazis. Anti-Semitism and hostility towards Jews as a group is something that goes back a long time. Okay, Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians. Okay, in the Old Testament, you can go back to that. So that's 2000 BCE. So this is not an invention of Adolf Hitler, but it is something he prescribes to, and he feels this way for a number of reasons. For starters, a lot of this has to do with the Treaty of Versailles. When Germany signs the Treaty of Versailles, ending World War I and accepting blame for World War I, Hitler is of the opinion that it is a Jewish conspiracy at the top of the German government that is responsible for signing the Treaty of Versailles and accepting the blame for the war. So that's kind of a big part of it also. There's also a big conspiracy that Germany didn't really lose World War I and that they were undefeated on the battlefield, quote unquote, but they ended up surrendering anyway. And that is kind of another piece of that kind of conspiracy puzzle that Hitler prescribes to. So this idea that Jewish people orchestrated the decline of Germany is part of it. When Hitler is arrested after the beer hall putsch, when he tries to overthrow the government and he goes to jail, this is when he writes his book called Mein Kampf, which is German for My Struggle. And in this book, he lays out a lot of his anti-Semitic kind of talking points. Another thing for Hitler is that during the time of the Weimar Republic, Germany's government in between World War I and World War II, when there was huge amounts of inflation and economic crisis and poverty, Hitler claims that is the doing of Jews in German government also. So he has all this animosity towards Jews as a group as a result. Hitler was also into eugenics, which is the idea of kind of creating a society based on desirable physical traits and reproduction. And the idea of Jews as an ethnic group or racial group did not fit into Hitler's picture of this master race. So Hitler's idea of this master race was kind of this Aryan, blonde hair, blue-eyed, kind of Northern European look that he himself was not even of. He was Austrian. He wasn't even German. But he had dark hair and dark eyes. So it's kind of interesting that he prescribed to that. But the Jews didn't fit that description for him. And all of those things are part of it. The Jews that were in charge of Germany during the Treaty of Versailles, the Jews that were allegedly in charge of Germany during the Weimar Republic, the Jews as a racial and ethnic group that didn't really fit with his vision for this master race. All of this stuff is kind of working together to create this and kind of polarize this anti-Semitism within the Nazi Party that ultimately leads towards the final solution. All right, I'll give you a second. Well, we don't even really need a second, right? There's not much on here. So this is an easy one. They start by identifying Jewish people and forcing them to wear armbands that designate them as Jews. And then eventually it's really as simple as the Nazis just rounding up all the Jews and sending them off to camps. There's two different kinds of camps that Jews are sent to. There's death camps, and there are concentration camps. We usually use the word concentration camp to refer to both of them, but there is a difference. Concentration camps are really just forced labor. Okay, so the Holocaust is going on during the latter portions of World War II. So the war machine and the war effort is still a thing that's happening amongst Germany. So a lot of these concentration camps are forced labor camps that force the Jews to work to kind of fuel the war machine. So that's part of it also. And then there's death camps, which is really just about extinction and elimination. And those are the ones that I think that we are more familiar with. So this is Jews kind of being brought to these various camps, literally for the express purpose of them being murdered. And that's a thing. It's impossible to put a final number on the casualties as a result of the Holocaust. Anywhere between 6 and 12 million is you'll find estimates there. We are talking about a serious number of people. If we look at the world population, and this is something that you can do on your own, the number of Jews in the world is not really that many compared to other religions. And Europe had a pretty significant concentration of Jewish population during the time. So Hitler's idea was to erase Jews as a people from the face of the earth, and he almost did. He came frighteningly close to achieving his goal. I'm going to go through a couple of pictures here, and this is always tough, this lesson, but it's important for you guys to understand kind of what we're looking at. So I'm going to go through a couple of pictures here. Some of this is unsettling, and I understand that, but it's important that you see some of it so that it galvanizes your understanding of exactly what happened here. This is the main gate at Auschwitz, which is probably the most famous or infamous, we should say, of the concentration/death camps. Starts out as a concentration camp and is kind of transformed, after a while into a death camp. And it also housed, when it was operating as a death camp, was still also a concentration camp also in other parts of it. So this is a rail line that leads directly into the camp. So you can see that incredible thought and work was put into making this whole process efficient. Arbeit macht frei is German for work shall set you free. So they're already kind of indoctrinating and brainwashing and sending a message to the people that are on their way into these camps as they are entering. Gas chambers here at Auschwitz is a scary thing. Jews were essentially told, okay, go into this building, you're all going to take a shower. And then the door is closed behind them. While they are in there, they're herded in there with, in intense numbers, incredible numbers of them, packed wall to wall. And then what happens is the soldiers that are kind of on duty essentially mix two chemicals together and or use a substance called Zyklon B, and they vent the fumes into these chambers. and a few minutes later, everyone is dead. You can go and find pictures of, close-up pictures of the walls of the gas chamber, and you see nail marks, down the walls from people trying to do whatever they can to claw their way out. Even though, they're trapped in a concrete box that, they know that's not going to work. But in the last moments of their life, in severe desperation, they are trying to do this to escape. All right, pictures get tougher. After they're gassed, you have, dozens and dozens of corpses at a time. And where are we going to put all these people? And burying people takes a lot of space and a lot of work. So it's a lot more economical from their perspective to just burn them. So they are put on this makeshift gurney and slid into an oven where their corpses are incinerated. They were removed from these rooms and stacked up, like they're not human beings before they're gassed after they're gassed and before they're burnt. And the ones who are lucky enough to live through this whole thing look like this. I'm sure if you went and asked some of the people in this picture, they probably would have preferred death, although that's easy for me to say. But it doesn't seem like much of an existence. You could see the emaciated...
They were really starving them.
Yeah, you could see the emaciated figures of these people. Like, the telltale is always the knees. Like, look at their knees. When your knee is wider than your thigh, that's a kind of startling image, and that kind of really drives home the point, right? So, look, there's a lot of movies about this stuff that I'm sure you guys have been exposed to. Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Schindler's List, amongst a lot of others, that can kind of spell out what life was like in these kinds of places. But yeah, super, super ugly, super gross, right? This is a picture some of you may have seen before, because one of the figures in this picture actually will survive the Holocaust and write a book. And forgive me, but I forget the name of the book, and it's something that I will try to look up. Elie Wiesel, I think, is the name of the survivor. But this is the way they are kind of put in these bunks. So for the labor part of it, this is what that labor part looks like, the dormitory for these people. So they are stacked in there in the most efficient way possible, so that they can fit as many as possible in there, right? So, you see that their food dish, the dish that they are given to hold their food when they are fed, is also kind of working as their pillow also. So you could see that here in the slide, and it kind of really drives that point home. So last but not least, the Allies, Germans, British, French, etc., they hear rumors of the things that are going on, but they're not really witnessing it, so it's hard for them to tell. But as the Allies march towards Berlin, basically what happens is that the Russians come from the east, and the rest of the Allies come from the west, and they all are going to meet in Berlin, and that's going to kind of finish off the Nazis. As the Russians and the other Allies are closing in on Berlin, they are coming upon these places periodically, and it is only then that they start to really learn the scope and horror of what has taken place. What will follow will be called the Nuremberg trials, which is a series of trials where surviving Nazi members are put on trial for crimes against humanity. and it becomes a model. The important part is the Nuremberg trials become a model for an international court system that is not particular to any one country. The International Criminal Court is the modern day version of the Nuremberg Tribunal, and the International Criminal Court is an international court that puts people on trial for crimes against humanity when their government is not able to do so themselves. Two examples of people that have been tried in the International Criminal Court are Slobodan Milosevic of Yugoslavia, and some of the other senior officials of Yugoslavia that may or may not have played a part in genocide there, and that's something that we'll talk about as we move forward in a couple of units. And the other person whose name you may have heard of is Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was tried in the International Criminal Court and found guilty of perpetrating a genocide against the Kurds, which is an ethnic people in northern Iraq that he was trying to eliminate. And he was found guilty and hung in public. And so that is an example of some of the things that we have seen out of the International Criminal Court. And the International Criminal Court is built on the foundation that is laid by Nuremberg.